Good afternoon, folks. If you're just joining us, welcome to City and State's Collaborative Technology Conference. If you've been here this morning, there's been a lot of good discussion. We have two more very strong panel discussions this afternoon. I'm glad you've stuck around. I'm John Lentz. I'm City and State's Editor-in-Chief. I'll be introducing our panel. But briefly, first I wanted to put in a plug for First Read Tech. It's a morning email newsletter sent out every weekday morning by 8 a.m. It's a product we launched at the start of 2019. There are a lot of news roundups out there on national tech news, but ours delivers the latest tech news right here in New York. I strongly encourage you to sign up. If you want, you can leave a business card up at the front check-in desk. And if you don't like it, it's quite easy to unsubscribe. And now without further ado, I'll introduce our panel number 3, Technology Partnerships for Public Safety and Security. And I'll hand it over to Nasir Memon, Vice Dean for Academics and Student Affairs and a professor at NYU Tandon School of Engineering, who is our moderator. Let's welcome the panel.
These things are on? Yep. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nasir Memon from NYU Tandon. And we're very fortunate to have an illustrious panel with us today. When I was told of who would be on the panel, I jumped at it and I said, of course, if I get the chance to moderate something. I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion. And the topic of today's panel, as mentioned earlier, is to do with technology partnerships for public safety and security. As you know, technology sort of is shaping our lives today. It pervades every aspect of our life. And along with the efficiencies that it brings, technology also brings risks. And although technology can be used to improve the way we provide security and safety to public, it also raises issues of safety and security on its own, right? Due to the fact that it is technology being deployed, new issues. And so so we'll have an interesting discussion on these topics today, and perhaps I would like to begin by asking the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Perhaps Jessica, you could start off.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Tish. I am the Deputy Commissioner of IT at the NYPD, where I oversee all NYPD technology development, and also, not obvious from the title, I oversee all of the NYPD's 911 call taking and dispatching. And I've been with the police department for 11 years. I've been the CIO for the past 6 years.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? My name is Deanne Criswell, and I am the Commissioner of Emergency Management here in New York City. I have been here just a short period of time. I started on July 1st. But in this role, I lead the city's response to and coordination of any type of event, from small events into large-scale responses and recovery, like a Hurricane Sandy. I previously spent several years in the federal government with FEMA and then at another local emergency management agency in Colorado. But it's exciting to be here today to talk about my views on how technology is really helping emergency management as a field and as a discipline really evolve in what we can do to support the residents.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Morgan Hetsig. I'm Senior Director of Global Operations at Dataminr. I'm very grateful to be sharing the stage with all of the panelists, but in particular Commissioner Tish, because she was a big part of me joining the NYPD just a couple years ago. So prior to Dataminr, I was NYPD, also previously at CNN and in finance, so diverse background. Also wear a hat on occasion that is a Navy Reserve hat as well. So grateful to be here and talking about public-private partnership. Won't speak a ton about Dataminr, but have a bunch of colleagues in the back who are happy to talk to you about it afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tito Gregg from GoTenna. I'm the Director of Sales there. And I'm really excited to be up here on the panel with everyone. My background started as a military officer, then I went over to Homeland Security, where I kind of transitioned into emergency management up until about 2 years ago when I came over to GoTenant. I've had the opportunity to work on several declarations that have been issued, sorry about that. And again, I look forward to hearing the panel's views on technology and how we're hopefully helping our responses.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps we'll start off with a broad and open question and sort of see where that takes us. So especially to Jessica and Deanne, what sort of are the challenges and opportunities that you see lying ahead for the next generation of public safety and security technology? Jessica, you want to start?
Okay, so one of the great joys for me about my job over the past 6 years is I've had the opportunity to watch IT go from sort of a sideshow at the NYPD to absolutely fundamental to everything that we do, impacting officer safety, impacting our ability to serve the public more efficiently and more effectively. And I would say today there is very little in the IT space that we do on our own, meaning most of our most impactful programs involve working with all of you, with companies in the law enforcement and public safety space, companies that are not necessarily in the law enforcement or public safety space, but provide our infrastructure. And I would say that a lot of the best ideas that we have, the things that are most impactful to our officers, are ideas that you all generate. So I can give the example of ShotSpotter, which is a technology that we use to detect gunshots that go off through 69 square miles of the highest shooting areas in the city. Instead of relying on someone calling 911 and reporting a gunshot, and that could be minutes, hours after they hear the gunfire, our officers on their smartphones get a real-time alert that the sensors picked up the gunshot. It triangulates to the specific location where that gunshot occurred. Our officers in real time can click one button and hear the actual audio of the gunshots. It's dramatically changed the way, first of all, the number of shots fired incidents that we respond to. ShotSpotter has a statistic that only 20% of gunfire across the country is actually called into 911. And we've really, when they first told me that, I didn't believe it. But we've basically proved that out through our use of ShotSpotter. So we're responding to many more instances of gunfire because we hear about them more because we get these automated alerts. We're responding faster to those incidents. And our officers report to us that they consider it one of the greatest tools they have to help address gunfire in New York City. So that's a really good example of a company that got it right, that thought about a real problem that cities and municipalities have, and that were able to operationalize it in a way that is useful for our cops. So let me just speak to that one moment. It would not be enough for a company to come and say, yeah, we can detect shots fired and we'll send you alerts. We'd worked with other companies in the past, and what we'd have is 95+% of the alerts that our cops got were false positives. They were cars backfiring, right? And so our cops didn't use it. It was not usable. So understanding the problem, and providing a technology and also a business model that made it useful, the information and the data that was being delivered useful for our cops. Those were the two big things that we look to our private sector partners to provide for us.
Deanne, you want to add something?
Yeah, great. You know, it's in emergency management, it's a really great time to be in this field because the field itself is continuing to grow and evolve. And, you know, unlike many of our other first responder agencies, emergency management takes a much broader and more holistic approach in trying to understand the scope of a problem that affects multiple different agencies across a city. And so one of the key things that we do in emergency management then, and one of the key roles that I think that we play, is our ability to create that shared understanding of what's going on and that shared situational awareness, or developing a common operating picture, so we're all getting the same information at the same time, and we're not conflicting each other. And so one of the things that I look forward to doing here while I'm in New York City is trying to create that platform, and this is where technology can really help us, is creating that platform where we can draw data from multiple different sources, multiple different agencies, that have applicable information. Just this morning we had a tabletop exercise to get ready for the winter storm season, and it's amazing how much really great information is out there that would be useful to other city agencies. And right now it's knowing who to call and when to call, or not even knowing what you might have a need for. Where if we could create a situational awareness platform where everybody can go to the same link and be able to get that information, really helps us do our job better and helps us make better decisions. One of the things that I talk a lot about to my team and my staff, and what I did a lot when I was at FEMA, is this concept of what, so what, and now what. I think that there's a ton of information out there. There's a ton of what out there that, just like you had talked, you know, you don't put it in context and you don't put the business case against it, and so you don't really know what you can do with it. So you need to take that and put the what into context. Why do I care about this information, and how is it going to affect my decisions that I need to make? That's the so what part of this, which then moves into the ability for me to make better data-driven decisions based on the information that's coming in. So the more that we can bring in technology to help us create this common situational awareness across a city, especially a city the size of New York City, but any city across the nation, is really going to help us make more informed decisions quicker, more effectively, and keep everybody informed to keep the public safer. You know, another good example of when I first got here over the summer was responding to the heat wave. We had 3 days of excessive heat, and we were asked to activate and open up cooling centers across the city. And so we did. We activated over 600 cooling centers. But the question that I had was, do we have them in the right place? Do we know where they need to be? Do those people that are the most vulnerable have access to these cooling centers? And so one of the things that we started to do, and one of the things that we'll continue to work on going into next year, is taking social vulnerability data and overlaying that with where these cooling centers perhaps are, so we can have a heat map of where do we have the ability to support the people that are in most need, and then identify where our gaps are, which is even more important, and how do we then fill those gaps by reaching out to other resources to help, you know, provide the right resource to the people that actually need it. Just one really small example of, you know, you had a lot of data, 600 cooling centers, and so what? Why do I care about the number 600? Are they in the right place? And how do we use technology and the resources that are really available and evolving every day to help put that in context and make better decisions so we can take care of the residents here in New York City or wherever you are?
Thank you. So let me ask the next question to the members of the panel from the private sector. So clearly the public sector needs technology, and what is it that the private sector can do, and what have they done? Can you give us some examples of how they can help the government for improving public safety and security? Morgan, maybe you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So one of the things that Commissioner Criswell highlighted is data. And we have a ton of data and a proliferation of data. And data acquisition is getting cheaper and cheaper. So it's not so much that we don't have the right data, it's how do we parse the data that we have into the data that's going to tell me where I should put my 600 cooling centers. So helping to manage that signal through noise problem is something that I think there are a variety of different companies working on, one of which is actually Dataminer. But from like a social media, public information perspective, that's one. I think ShotSpotter, to Commissioner Tish's point, is yet another. So I think we can help on the parsing of data once acquired. How can we best leverage that data to solve some of our challenges? I think from a tech perspective, the proliferation, again, is not just the data problem. It's, you can go on Amazon and buy night vision goggles. You used to have to be a Navy SEAL to go buy night vision goggles or have them issued to you. So tech, this public-private tech partnership is a very tried and true thing that we have seen for years and years and years. The private sector builds the thing, and very frequently the government ends up using it. So I think one of the keys there is making sure you're fostering very successful relationships. And in order to foster those successful relationships, and I'm sure you've heard this refrain throughout today, is really around like the private sector viewing the government not as yet another client or customer, and the government not necessarily viewing the private sector as just another vendor, but instead there is this very unique relationship. It's the golden rule. She who holds the gold makes the rules, but the gold can be either a monetary thing or it can be knowledge. And I think there is knowledge that is spread in government, but also outside of government, so making sure that there is this sort of mutual respect within the partnership and relationship is really important. So.
Cale, you want to provide us some examples?
Sure. So the first thing I would like to say, I come from an operational background, so not as much time on the private sector. So I have the opportunity to work in situational awareness. Go back to what the commissioner said. When we talk about an operation where technology now creates a full picture for us, it's extremely critical, not only for our first responders, but also for those people that we're working with. So what technology has done, at least over the last decade, in my opinion, has created this snowball effect where we can now, in emergency management, take technology and use it to everyone's benefit, and it's just been an amazing thing to see. So whether it's FirstNet or Shots Fired, or there's a lot of different technologies that are out there that are used, all of them combined together have created this situational awareness or picture for us, so that in our command centers we can better serve those people and better protect our officers who are out there in the field. We've had the opportunity to work with some larger areas that have been devastated, Puerto Rico being one of them, with creating some redundant situational awareness. Now, we talk about communications, but really what we're talking about is being able to define where each of our people are out in the field and how we can better position, pre-position, and post-position our people throughout an event, and maintaining that awareness throughout the event. And it's an amazing time to be in this industry, to be able to work with people who bring new technology to the table because they were born with it and they use it, and it just seems to be escalating at a tremendous pace, and hopefully we can continue to use that technology to the benefit of everyone.
The one thing I would add on that is the communications piece is a really critical one. It's one that is changing at a very, very rapid scale. So part of what the private sector can help the public sector do is, as those communication lanes are changing, making sure we keep up with that pace of change. So if somebody is in an emergency response type scenario and they're leveraging, let's say, a Twitter or a Facebook for their ability to alert the government to their location, we do a lot of work to make sure that we're tracking that information from one platform to another. Thank you.
So picking up on Morgan's point earlier that she made about there needs to be a collaboration between the private sector and the government, perhaps Jessica, Deanne, you want to sort of maybe talk a little bit about how that could be fostered, how that could be developed, so that there is this back and forth, the collaboration and the partnership that develops?
Yeah, want me to start? I can start. Yeah, I think it's emergency management is all about partnerships, whether it's with our public sector agencies or it's with our private sector agencies. And again, as technology is continuing to evolve and emergency management is continuing to evolve, fostering those relationships early to help understand the type of decisions that we have to make and how technology and private sector partners can come in and help us make those decisions. You know, one great example that I have of a partnership between private sector and the public sector is our ability now in New York City to notify the public in the event of an emergency. And that's using our Notify NYC capability through an app or going on the internet. And that really started out as a proof of concept with a private sector partner to say, hey, this is something that is starting to evolve. We're really looking at how we can better notify the public. What can you do to help us build a capability to reach out to the communities and let them know what's happening? And so it started out as a proof of concept with just a couple of different areas here within New York City, and this is well before my time here in New York, I think back in 2006 or 2007. And we worked together to develop that capability. We listened to those that were receiving the information, the community, they gave us feedback. One of the pieces of feedback, for example, was, you know, we get too much information, and so how do we create that information fatigue and then people don't actually use it? And so we were able to create buckets of information that people could sign up for so they only got what they wanted, and we continued to evolve that technology. And so once that proof of concept was done, we were able to really launch the app citywide, sent out an RFP to different vendors, and they came in, and we have what's now the Notify NYC app that we use on a daily basis, sending out many messages for planned events as well as no-notice events. But we continue to evolve that technology even today. So as many of you probably know, here in New York City, we have a variety of different nationalities, and we were able to most recently improve our Notify capability by being able to translate it into 13 different languages, which we just released earlier this year. So another way that we're working with the private sector to continue to evolve the technology that we have. I would say one of the challenges that we have, the beauty of this example is that we work together to develop it, but I would say as we look at other technologies, one of the challenges that we have is that so many technologies are built to try to be able to support a wide variety of potential customers. And so you have the tendency to perhaps lose the flexibility to tailor that to your specific needs. What was really great about this Notify NYC capability is we were able to tailor it specifically to what we needed. And so working with private sector partners going forward, understand that there is this need to create a tool that can be used by many, but also creating the ability to tailor it to whatever jurisdiction you're reaching out to so it can support their individual needs.
I would say, so I'll start out. Data siloization makes me crazy. When I took over at the NYPD in IT, all of our different databases were basically, each lived in its own silo. So we had an arrest system, a complaint system, a warrant system, an aided system. This might be like a slight exaggeration, but just like to make the point, like you'd have to run someone's name in 15 different systems to get a sense of what their history was with the police. Same thing with sensors, a camera system, a radiation sensor system, a chemical sensor system, a license plate reader system. And so what we've done over the past 6 years is really try to democratize the data, but to do that, you had to de-silo it and put it all together. And that actually makes the data so much more powerful when you can see one data source in the context of another data source. So getting to your question, how does this relate to the question? It is rare for any project that we undertake to involve only one outside vendor. Our biggest and our most successful and our most impactful programs can involve a dozen different companies working together and working with us to achieve our vision. And then it becomes a shared vision. It's the hardest part of what I do, is getting different companies to sit in a room together with us and work together and not point the fingers at each other, and to understand or develop that shared vision and really that mentality. The best example I have is our domain awareness system. There we have Microsoft, IBM, Cisco, ShotSpotter, AT&T, Apple. I mean, I'm not saying everyone, just to make the point. All of these people from all of these companies sitting in one room building a single tool for the police. And in order to do that, the company has to obviously understand their lane and their piece of it, but they also have to understand and embrace how their lane and their piece of it fits into the larger whole. And if there is one thing I would ever like to say to different companies is, as a customer, your ability to see beyond your own vision, but understand how your vision might intersect with ours, but fit into our larger vision. It's really hard to do, but it is a huge factor in the success of IT programs at the NYPD, and I assume more broadly.
Add to that, Cale or Morgan?
Sure, I think, and obviously as vendors, we're all guilty of it, right? Because we like to come up with solutions. We like to come up with this holistic solution. So it's important for us to remember what pain point we feel inside the solution, and then to listen to our customers and make sure that we're sticking with that. Because again, if you give us the opportunity, we'll come up with a solution for everything. And it's not that it's not monetarily driven. It's ego and the desire to create new things. So it's important for us again to remember the pain point that we fix and to stay inside of our lane on that and listen to our customer so they can tell us the pain point that we're fixing.
Yeah, I think another piece as well is relationship management, and what I mean by that is you have very successful partnerships when you have a shared vision, as was discussed previously, but that shared vision comes with shared understanding and shared language, and I think part of why Commissioner Tish is so successful at her job is because she can speak the language. She learned contract law at Harvard and can speak the language in a way that I think the person across from her can also understand. So I think part of it is both sides making sure that we have the right person in the room, both on the private sector side and on the public sector side. And in this particular case, it's someone who's pretty senior, but not in all cases is the most senior person the right person to be having the conversation.
Okay. So before moving on, I'd just like to remind the audience that we will leave aside about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So perhaps, I think the way of taking them, there's a mechanism, you write them down and move them forward, and we will. So please start thinking about your questions and forwarding them to me. So that was about public and private sort of partnerships we talked about so far. What role do you think academia can play in this? After all, they also are sort of seeped in technology, and they represent the brightest minds, and they can bring talent to bear on problems. So what role do you think academia can play?
So for me, I can talk about our body camera program.
Mm-hmm.
So we now have the largest body camera deployment in the world. We're very proud of that. All of our police officers, sergeants, lieutenants, and coming soon, executives in the NYPD that perform patrol functions are equipped with body cameras. And as we were developing our policy for how we were going to use our body cameras, when we were going to have our officers turn them on, when we were going to have our officers turn them off, what our policy was going to be for activations, what our policy was going to be for retention of the data, all of those questions. We worked very closely with members of the academic community who had done previous studies of smaller rollouts of body cameras, who had, written papers on it and looked through all of the data. And we are working with them now as they are studying our body camera data to help refine our internal NYPD policies for how we use them. So I think that with academia, if you pick the right question, and if it's a question that is right for an academician, and you pick the right people in academia to work with, those can be some very important, very powerful partnerships.
I agree. You want to add?
Yeah, what I would say from the emergency management standpoint is academia can really help us to look back on events that have happened in the past. What kind of information could we have gleaned in the midst of that event, or what kind of trends are we seeing across the country as it relates to all of the emerging threats that we're facing, and how can we better use technology to predict those types of situations moving forward. I would also say academia can really help us in the forward-looking piece and the foresight, and looking at the effects of climate change and what that's going to do to us over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and what types of decisions are we going to have to make now in our preparedness phase to make sure that we're postured better, and using technology to help us better do predictive analysis of what we might be facing going forward.
Anyone with anything to add?
We have a whole bunch of PhDs who we work with on a regular basis, and I look at what they're working on and don't immediately always see the application to what I work in operations, so I'm very execution focused. But we have our algorithms that underpin our platform could not be what they are without academics, both in-house and them getting exposure external from data miners. So I'm very grateful to the partnership with academia in general. I also think it's a great place and always has been. If you think about, let's take going to the moon. Mm-hmm. It's been a while, I know, or at least since the first time. But that took 5% of national GDP to go and do it right, and we never could have done that without academia. So there's a lot to learn, I think, across the board, currently and always has been. So a really good partnership there for all three together.
So this is a shameless plug. We'll just start there. So we have the opportunity to work with Texas A&M and their engineering school. Yeah. We have great talent inside of our company, but we know that there are times that we have to go outside. So we use A&M not only for our development, but as well as our testing, because they have one of the best emergency management training centers in the world. So we love them. If anybody gets a chance to go visit A&M, have at it, but the use for academic development for us is critical, and I think for most companies across the board, because that's where there is so much talent. We can only bring so much in for companies our size, but we can find them, again, at great schools like A&M or NYU.
Right. I was going to respond with a shameless plug myself, okay. Saying here in NYU, in New York City, we have one of the best cybersecurity programs in the country, and in fact, we have some people there that will give you more information about it. So, sorry. So let's first go. We were talking about what we are doing now and what can be done, but let's go forward a bit more into the future. And there is talk about. There's so much hype about artificial intelligence and automation that's in the air today. Of course, some of it is hype, some of it is not. I mean, we really see effective mechanisms and solutions coming out. So how do you see, like 5 years, 10 years from now, artificial intelligence or automation playing a role in sort of securing or emergency management and security or emergency management or public safety?
Yeah, I'll talk about artificial intelligence more from an operational standpoint than a securing standpoint. And again, from the operational standpoint, the ability to bring in AI to do predictive analytics and help us visualize more of what we're facing. From a community preparedness standpoint, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to use artificial intelligence to help people better understand the threats that they're facing at an individual level and at a community level, so they are more apt to take action in order to prepare themselves. You know, you just watch the Weather Channel these days, and they show, and I guess I'm speaking a little bit more on the VR side of this than the AI side of this, but you know, they show the different changes in surge when a storm is approaching and how it's going to impact you. And it's those types of things that are really powerful messages that get out to the public. And emergency management can only do so much in trying to get people to understand the threats that they face, and anything that we can do to help better predict what those threats are or help demonstrate the impacts that they're going to receive are really going to help them step up in their own level of preparedness, which then provides a safer community in general, but allows us to have a greater ability to do our job and protect those that are really in need.
I think with AI looking out over the next 5 years for law enforcement, the key issue is going to be how do you use it fairly and responsibly? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so often we'll be approached by companies that have this algorithm or that algorithm, and it's almost like a chip is missing. It's like, should we really be doing this? Don't you think you should think about that before you come in and tell me I should be doing this? So I think it's incumbent on law enforcement, it's really incumbent on any industry that uses it to leverage it where it should be leveraged to create operational efficiencies, but to always do it, in particular in policing, with fairness and responsibility in mind. I will also say that when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong, and has the opportunity to be dangerous, because what is it? It's insights. And if you give people the wrong insights using AI, in the law enforcement world, it can be very dangerous. I think in pretty much any industry, it can be very dangerous. So I think over the next 5 years, you'll continue to see law enforcement agencies leverage AI for different functions. I spoke about ShotSpotter, correlating this arrest report with that complaint report with that aided card. That's pretty straightforward, but it needs to be done thoughtfully, and it needs to be done the right way.
Thank you. That's a very excellent comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, and I want to pull the thread on a little bit, because we're sort of building the plane while we're flying it in terms of the legal precedents here. So every week there's a new case in some district court or some appellate court somewhere that is trying some case around privacy and security and cybersecurity, with judges presiding over those cases with very limited legal precedents, and they're being fought by lawyers and not tech people, as they should be. But we are sort of in this unprecedented world, and yes, there is sort of, there was a time when we didn't have any speeding laws because we didn't have cars, and now we do. Now we have a traffic code, and we have something that we can point to regardless of what the particular violation is. So I think we spoke a little bit earlier on the panel about some challenges of next-gen technology, and that's one that I definitely see from my vantage outside of government, but also occasionally dipping my toe into it. So thanks for raising.
Thank you. Okay. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but there's another issue that's coming up that's a bit disturbing related to artificial intelligence, and that's the development of like deep fake like technology, right? The fact that everything is digital and digital objects can be manipulated. We always knew that, and we had forensics techniques. I myself have worked for about 20 years on that problem. But today they can be created with alarming ease, and their ability to do that is only sort of increasing. So sometimes I ask these questions, and perhaps Jessica, this might be sort of related to what you do, is that you have body cameras on policemen, right? And you need ways to be able to authenticate it, especially in today's world where the technology is not there right now, but I can see it in 5 years that one can artificially generate an entire scene of almost anything happening. And then how do you know whether this is real or not?
I'll give you a crazy story.
Uh-huh.
We were thinking about giving out our body cameras. We had a company come to us, and we were looking at their camera, and a sergeant who works for me took the camera down to his office for a few hours. He came back, and the camera was split open, and he had extracted the SD card, and there was no encryption on it, and he was able to manipulate the video, and it was crazy. It's like, that's nuts. So that is something that we think very deeply about. That's obviously not okay to deploy body cameras like that with that opportunity for manipulation. But we also need our private sector partners' help to think about those things and not develop solutions that provide opportunities for that type of manipulation.
Anyone else wants to add to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, all technology can be used the wrong way, right?
Sure.
I mean, my own technology included. I've had multiple calls from HSI asking, how they can overcome it because different people are utilizing it. I think it's just incumbent on us as vendors to see that, to know that, and constantly try to overcome that through whatever encryption type technologies or things that we can employ. But that's always going to be an issue that we're all going to face on an ongoing basis.
Sure.
The one,
Sorry, Morgan. Yeah.
the one thing I would add is that you mentioned deepfakes. From my perspective, this is actually where Commissioner Criswell's agency really comes in. It's like bread and butter OEM. How do you make people more prepared? So I think we're only as strong as our weakest link, and in the cyber domain, the weakest link is actually like the individual more often than not. So how do we give people the equivalent of CERT training and classes and really make sure that there is this sort of understanding that it's not the cybersecurity analyst who needs to find the deep fake. It's actually like the informed voter, citizen, who takes the responsibility themselves to go and find the information, but let's make it free and easy and accessible.
Thank you. So let me move on to questions from the audience. The first question is both for Jessica and Diane. And the question says, what is the best way for a potential private sector partner to reach out to your agency and develop a meaningful relationship?
So we have very strict rules about how that works at the NYPD. And the best way to reach out to us is to follow the rules and to write a letter to the police commissioner's office saying what your company does, what your interest is in working with the NYPD, and requesting a meeting. That then gets filtered down to me if it's in the IT space, and we take those meetings all the time. But that is the right way to do it. And it's actually very frustrating and wastes time when it's done other ways, because then we just always have to redirect.
Right, and I would echo that. I would just also add that you can always look for opportunities where requests for information are being put out when we're looking to test new technologies. That would be a great time in a formal process to be able to come in and then demonstrate your technology as it meets the type of information that we're seeking at that particular moment.
Okay. Another question for Commissioner Tish. What is being done to reduce the volume of non-emergency calls to 911, and how do you measure success?
311?
Call 311?
The city actually just recently replatformed and upgraded the legacy 311 system. So there's a call center, there's a mobile app, there's a website. And so we like to direct non-emergency quality of life calls to 311. And if a member of the public happens to call 911 with a quality of life issue, the 911 call taker will direct that person to 311.
Perhaps this is, again, both to Jessica and Deanne. What is the status of using integrated software solutions to streamline the hiring and selection processes in your agencies?
Integrate what?
What is the status of using integrated software solutions to streamline the hiring selection processes for, say, police officers or?
So I can do this one. So obviously, to become a police officer, you have to take a civil service test. And the process of becoming a police officer after you've taken that test has historically been highly cumbersome and very manual. You have to physically see an investigator and bring in your high school diploma and all of these documents. And we're actually now starting to about to launch CRM platform to streamline the process of becoming a police officer. I'm very excited about that.
So let me just end with a question to all of you, saying what are the key challenges faced by this sector, safety and security, and where do you see the need for technology to sort of find solutions the most? Like one or two things that come to your mind.
Cyber. I can't think of any program that we have, at least in my world, where cyber is not the key issue. It affects cost, it affects timeline, it affects usability and reliability. And we are at a place where, at least at the NYPD, where cyber is not a sideshow. It is fundamental to anything and everything that we do. I don't accept a timeline on a project or a program or a budget on a project or a program if my CISO hasn't weighed in and signed off on it. It also can add real complexity, but that's sometimes when you add complexity, people just don't want to deal with it. I think it's most important to deal with it the best you can up front and not shy away from that extra complexity. It is just a fact of working in IT in this world.
And not to reiterate the cyber point, definitely a concern that everybody has. So what I would add to that for an agency like mine or for emergency management is we are trying to consistently bring in new talent to help us develop some of these software solutions in-house. And a challenge for us is always being able to compete with the private sector and being able to bring in the right talent that helps us develop those tailored solutions for us. And so it takes a really special person that has that commitment to public service as well as the capability and desire to be innovative and creative, you know, that wants to come work for a public safety agency and really help to drive change and really establish the narrative for where emergency management is going to be going in the future.
The only thing that I would close with is we think a lot in my current job at Data Miner about incident detection and incident response. And I think one of the key pieces that has changed over the last couple of years is the golden hour doesn't exist anymore. You don't have an hour if you're a senior leader within an organization to figure out all the facts of the case and how you're going to respond to the event. You have, hopefully, a couple minutes. So we really look at that particular problem set and trying to point tech at making sure that wherever information is breaking, we find a way to get that to people who are keeping the public safe.
I'd have to go with cyber is our big concern. And again, it's an ongoing thing that we're always going to be challenged with and deal with. But as vendors, we have to accept more of a, and this may not be popular with vendors, but we have to accept maybe more regulation or oversight so that we can create these encryption layers that are more uniformed across the board so it's easy for agencies to interop with other types of vendors. Because right now we're very siloed and we have our encryption layer, Motorola has theirs, Harris has theirs. We need to come up with a more unified system and it'll probably take some regulation to get us to that point so that we can have a greater level of security.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an illuminating session, and let's thank the speakers.